But I would now like to welcome, going from security at the political level to cybersecurity, we do have in studio right now, we have Doug White, Chair of the Cybersecurity and Networking at Roger Williams University and co-host of the Secure Digital Life. Thank you for coming in.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And you just came in from doing the Secure Digital Life.
I did. I just came from Secure Digital Life, which we do every Wednesday, and we talk. I was talking about the same subject on there because I know a lot of our viewers are interested in these same kind of topics, and we have everybody wanting to know about what's going to get hacked next.
Well, what is going to get hacked next? One of the reasons that we had reached out to you, Doug, is the news this week, and I want to just pull it up here. Malware that could knock out power grids. This, we see the headlines. They tend to be pretty shocking. People might have some fear what that could mean, but
Right.
You have a reaction that you want to share with folks. Is it not as potentious as most people might think it might be?
To me, I mean, all that stuff's always about how severe can something get? How do I generalize an attack? So can I attack the United States? Can I attack just me? And that's where my fear level is rising. It's always about risk. To me, the electrical grid is always about these very isolated pockets of things, and it's very challenging, I think, to create a generalized attack, which would mean that you're going to attack the United States or you're going to attack even the state of Rhode Island. And so to do that means all these systems would have to be fairly standardized, and they're not.
Which they're not. So if someone were to attack, and we kept on saying Providence or Pawtucket, how prepared are these entities for a cyber attack?
Well, I think that they're less prepared than the business world. That's been an infrastructure has been an area of neglect, as we well know, for years in many different levels. Whether it's roads or bridges or it's cyber infrastructure. Cyber resilience is something that just started to be thought about. Forever we've thought about how do we protect this building from fire, and we have all kinds of rules and regs and things about that, and so we have smoke detectors and sprinklers. But cyber resilience is something we just started to think about in business maybe like 20 years ago.
Okay.
Today we're starting to think about it on an infrastructure level.
And infrastructure is just catching up.
It is, and it hasn't caught up yet, so there are definitely pockets of risk all over the place. How resilient are we to those things? I know that in the state of Rhode Island, we spent the last 10 years really building thoughts about how does FEMA, REMA groups, these emergency management associations, respond not just to fires, floods, famines, locusts, or whatever else they want to respond to. How do they respond to a cyber attack that suddenly does affect the entire state of Rhode Island and shuts down the electrical grid? And we have tried to build action plans and work with both city, state, local, fire, police, government, academics, industry, to develop plans so that we would have something in place if this kind of thing were to occur, and we had to get to that place.
And you mentioned it, we were talking before you came on, there was just an exercise if there was a solar flare. We've heard about this having the potential to knock systems, electricity just out altogether. And you said last time the test was given 30 minutes. What would you do in a solar flare?
Yeah, we did an exercise and they told us, we didn't know what the exercise would be. We walked in the room and they said, you have 30 minutes, there's going to be a class, whatever it was, I don't remember the exact term, a class something or other solar flare that's going to be essentially a very, very damaging to equipment. So that means your phone, that means your car, that means the stoplight systems could actually be just taken out by the solar flare, and we had 30 minutes.
So you have 30 minutes. We've heard about solar flares before, and something that there might be a potential for a warning. I don't want you to sort of give away the secret sauce, but when you're given 30 minutes, kind of walk us through that exercise. Do you let the public know? Do you make sure, how do you make sure things are secure? What's the order of approaching something that you know is coming, could be potentially very impactful, but what's the triage? Where do you start first?
Well, in most states, including Rhode Island, there are emergency management associations that exist. They're very good. They're made up of people that deal. This is all they do. This is their job, is waiting for the end of the world, which is very very exciting and also very scary. What we did was we immediately activated a thing that's called the Joint Cyber Task Force, which is made up of civilians, police, emergency personnel, and military personnel to respond. So this notice came simulated. The governor's office would certainly issue a statement on this, saying there is an impending event. We immediately then basically took charge of a bunch of guard units that we had available. Well, there's National Guard units all over the place.
Okay.
And
Gotta have security out.
And they're actually responsible for a lot of emergency management roles, and are really good, and they're trained, and they can handle this. And what we told them to do was run around the state turning off as many computers as they could. Because if the machines were turned off, they weren't going to be impacted by the
Okay.
solar flare. They could be, but hopefully with them being turned off, they would at least have some survivability. And this was 30 minutes. We didn't have time. It was a great exercise. We didn't have time to sit down, form a committee, develop an optimal solution, pass a resolution, and reach consensus. And I was in charge of, I was running the exercise. So sometimes you just literally are sitting in a captain's chair and you have to say, here's what we're going to do.
You've got to make these decisions
you do it.
real time. And you know, that's just one of the things that crops up again, having seen the headlines this week about the potential to take a grid out, talk about a solar flare. But one of the things that's been in the headlines about cybersecurity is election security. And you know, you hear in a number of levels of, you know, were the Russians involved?
Mm-hmm.
How were they involved? Because there's different levels of it. When you talk about hacking, there's hacking into emails and going into the DNC and finding, you know, all the emails about that. But there's different levels. So there's finding out information
Right.
and disseminating information. But then there's the actual hacking of
Right.
a electoral process. And I want
Right.
to start with that. And we
Okay.
talked a little bit about that. Kind of similar to the grid, they're not all interconnected.
Right.
It's not like someone could go in and just pull a lever and switch everything up.
Right. Well, one of the examples that was used that I saw was a person who was a professor, and he hacked a voting machine. So he took a certain model of a voting machine and he hacked it. Now,
And was
the
this
way-
popular? Has this been on the web? Is this something that folks
Yeah,
have?
there was a lot of people talking about that particular article, and it was used a lot by the media to talk about this. And because this person was willing to come out to all of you and say, you know, I can hack
I can
this
do it.
machine.
Yep.
And there was no lie there. I mean, the person did do it. They demonstrated how it was done. But here's the catch. The catch was, get down on your hands and knees and go up the machine and take the back off of it and switch something inside of it out.
You're literally, I mean, it's fairly obvious that, or is it fairly obvious? I mean,
It
you're
would be-
manipulating, you're doing something.
Well,
So-
I'll tell you, I used to do physical pen tests, and one of the ways we did physical pen tests is just called hiding in plain sight. And that means I put on a hat that says Pony Express or some other transport company, and I walk in the building and act like I'm supposed to be there. And I got my clipboard, and I'm here to repair, I'm here to validate the election machine. I get down on my hands and knees, and they say I got to check two things. I'll be 5 seconds. But to me, the catch was he did one machine.
Okay.
So where I vote in a very small town in Rhode Island, and there's one voting machine. Okay, so, but there's not very many people. Most people's polling places would have 5, 6, 7 of these machines, maybe. I don't know. I go to the small one. But if you
But
go
what
to
if the
one,
Pony Express goes into the one with 5, 6, or 7?
well, then I got to do each one. Okay, so could you do each one? Yeah, you could. But now you did one polling place. So now you got how many polling places you got to do to even start to make a significant impact on the election, and then switch it up. That's not the only model. So if you go across the state of Rhode Island, there are different models in every town.
So do you think governments and, you know, Secretary of State's offices are ahead of the curve? Do they know that? Do they have, when they put that new equipment out, is it so it can be not, you know, hack proof, but they know how to make sure that, you know, it's the most difficult machine possible to hack?
I don't really know. I mean, I haven't really talked to them. I think that we all need to continue to focus on cyber resilience. I think states and government have had less budget dedicated to this than many other entities. But I do think that one of the only good things that come out of all this have been a lot of renewed focus on this. So they're certainly looking at it at this point. And things like Joint Cyber Task Force were able to bring civilian expertise into that same equation, which I think really helped. Because suddenly you could bring in somebody from the University of Rhode Island who was an expert on this. And that really helps because it's a resource that you have right here. Why not use it? And that was what Joint Cyber Task Force was all about.
So a couple other questions on the national stage. There was a very inflammatory headline recently in Forbes magazine that you heard about. Cybersecurity is dead. What was your reaction when you saw that?
Well, I figured I would treat it just the way I treat all my money. I take all my money, and instead of putting it in a bank, I just pile it in my driveway because banks keep getting robbed, so why bother to put your money in a vault? I mean, it's just going to get broken into. My reaction was, this is a silly, hyperbolic news. It didn't really make any sense to me because this is exactly like why, even though there are more murders and there are more robberies, you still have police on the street. because they do help control. And you want to control cyber problems and cybersecurity and cyber resiliency, just like you control fires and crime. And if you don't, it's going to be worse.
And as you mentioned fire and crime, let's go back to fire. You said maybe the ideal way, or sort of the best way at this stage, is insuring companies. It's insurance, as you said, as a way to mitigate cybersecurity. And, you know, as you said, when you get actuaries in, you know, finding out where you're at. Are we going to see this grow?
Oh, absolutely. You're seeing a huge growth and a huge development in the industry right now, in the insurance industry. I've been contacted multiple times by different people saying, could we just talk about this? What's your take on it? Because they're trying to learn. And this is, and you know, they don't have any basic. Actuarials are all based on data. So they want to know mortality, they look at history. They go back and they say how many people died, how many people fell off bridges, how many people, you know, how many people got run over in the street out front. And that's how they build their models. So for cyber, there's not as big of a model. So actuarials are having to try to figure out, well, where are the risks? How do we mitigate the risks? And how much should that cost? Because what will it cost us if this happens? And as they get involved in it, it grows into a common thing where maybe at some point in the future we all have cyber insurance, just like we have homeowners insurance against a fire. Because I've had people call me about their, like, say, family photos. I had a person call me and they said, I have something like 12,500 and something family photos. Yeah, and they're all on this computer at my house, and the computer went bad, and it crashed. And he said, what would it take to get this back? He ended up paying around $4,000 to get this back.
$4,000.
But he said, this is my whole life. Every photo I've ever taken of my children, every family, you know, all my parents, I digitized all my old photos, and then we got rid of them. And I said, so you have backups, right? And he said, I meant to do that.
Is that really the first thing you tell folks? Make sure things are backed up.
Well, of course, and make sure they're backed up out of band, which means not just on the same machine where the data is. Because people do that all the time.
In a physical other location, in the
It needs to
cloud.
be somewhere else. Well, the cloud is a place to put things, but be sure you're not connected to it, because if you're connected to it, bad things can jump across and jump onto the cloud and do things too. But yeah, you need that, you know, that permanent copy of things, because you may at some point in your life have to restore everything from backups. We've seen that a lot with ransomware and all these other kind of problems lately. But I think insurers will start to push in that direction too, to say, what's this worth to you? Your whole life is here. How much will it take to recreate it? So here's what it, and we won't insure you if you don't. Just like they say you have to wear seatbelts.
You've got to take the necessary steps. And you're Roger Williams, you're in academia, so you've got the real world experience, you've got the experience at college. What do you have on your research plate? I mean, what are we going to see from you in the coming weeks and months? What is the university expecting?
No, I'll tell you what I've been writing a lot about legal issues. I have some great colleagues who we work in this. The most recent thing we published was about revenge pornography and the need for better laws and better mechanisms for people to try to deal with the fact that an ex is publishing risque or even incredibly revealing photos of them repeatedly on what are literally called, I didn't know anything about this, which shows you how naive I am, what are called revenge porn sites, which are just dedicated to this, which is like, you know, and this is a horrific experience for somebody to have to undergo. I got contacted through my private investigation group, and we were looking at this case, which was a person that was just being harassed. They had put their name and phone number and home address up on the internet and said, "Hey, come and get me," essentially. Yeah, that was not a fun thing to go through for this person, and dealing with it was very bad. So we've been doing a lot of research in that area.
It's a cross-section of cybersecurity and legal. And how in 2017, you know, this isn't a new phenomenon, but maybe a proliferated one, you know, how do they tighten the laws?
It's a challenge. I mean, our legal system was designed a long time ago, and I don't know what the solution is. If I did, I'd write it down and make a whole lot of money. But I mean, you know, the idea that there's all these laws that slowly move forward to reach fruition is a good thing. I mean, you know, when they wrote the Constitution, all these things, it was sort of built with the idea that we move forward slowly so we don't do anything dramatic and drastic. But unfortunately, technology changes quickly, and the rules change quickly, and you know, things that laws are being passed to deal with today may not even be relevant by the time those laws get on the books and people are trained in how to deal with it. And it's a huge challenge for law enforcement and lawyers as well, because lawyers and law enforcement personnel are having to deal with this rapidly changing world on all sides. I just deal with the technology side of it, and it's hard to keep up. And then you take somebody like the computer crimes unit of the state police, they have to deal with all of it.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging to try to keep up with the tech skills, the law enforcement skills, the personnel skills, and all that, and put all that together and actually make it effective.
So is this a good field for students to go into? You're at Roger Williams. You get kids come and they're like, oh, I don't, I'm thinking maybe of getting into this. What would you say?
Absolutely. For the foreseeable future, I mean, I think back to what we were talking about earlier, there's going to come a day when it's either via actuarial insurance companies or the federal government, they're going to mandate that cities, states, and towns have to have coverage for this. They're going to have cyber resilience. That means there'll be even more jobs. And right now we can't fill all the jobs that we have. I have employers calling me saying, can you, and every now and then some of them are kind of naive, sorry.
I'm not going to name names.
They call me and say, can you send me 3 people? I got 3 open positions. And I'm like, right, yeah, I don't have one person to send you. Maybe next year. And so there's definitely a shortage of people. This is growing. We've seen in Rhode Island has had a huge growth in Cyber Patriot, which is a high school program to allow students to train and practice, and it's almost like sports. In fact, if I could get it like sports, I'd be so happy, because I want schools to be poaching the best programmers from the other schools and things. If we could get there, we'd be in so much better shape. But that's coming along, but it's taken a long time to get there. So for the foreseeable future, this is a growth field. There's a lot of high-paying jobs,
Okay.
so.
Encourage your kids.
Hey, or you, we'll take everyone who can do it.
Well, I appreciate your coming in today with everything going on in this cybersecurity world. I'm sure we'll be asking you questions moving forward. So I appreciate your accessibility, your expertise. Doug Waite, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so
very much for coming in today. I'm just checking in the latest news here. Let you go around the corner. Very much appreciate it. It is warm down here in the Go Local studio, the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. That was Doug Waite, the Chair of Cybersecurity and Networking at Roger Williams University. Wanted to get him in studio here today due to the news this week that there's some malware apparently that can take down electrical grids. Now, wanted to sort of pick his brain what that could possibly mean for Rhode Island. He seemed to sort of, quell some fears, and that they're not all interconnected, that if it even happened, it would be on a piece-by-piece basis. Talked about the state's Joint Cybersecurity Task Force preparing for events that could potentially have a major impact on folks' lives, talking about what would happen if there was a solar flare. So good to be able to pick his brain talking about